everyone. What I'm about to tell you is relevant for Shabbos Parshat Matot Maseh, which is also Rosh Chodesh Av. There's a Shabbos where we are in the middle of the 3 weeks. We usually read Gimel de Poranuta, namely the 3 harsh Haftorahs before Tisha B'Av. But it's also Rosh Chodesh, and usually when a Rosh Chodesh comes out on Shabbos, there's a special Haftorah called Hashamayim Kisi. So are we going to choose the Haftorah of Rosh Chodesh, or are we going to choose to continue the second into the 3 harsh Haftorahs? The Torah, when he codifies what we do during these 3 weeks, he uses the following terminology. Misham va'elach, from that time on, namely from Yud Zayin B'Tammuz until Bereshis, Lefi Azman v'Lefi HaMeorah. We're going to be sensitive to the time of the year and to the events of the year. And therefore he says, we read Talta de Poranuta, 3 harsh Haftorahs that we're going to read in the next 3 weeks. And after Tisha B'Av, Sheva de Nechamta, 7 Haftorahs of comfort. But when the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, codifies the law, he says, we read these 3 harsh Haftorahs before Tisha B'Av, 7 Haftorahs of comfort afterwards. No more, no less. This is what we do, and it's conclusive. I would like to suggest there's 2 perspectives here, choosing what obligates us in choosing a specific Haftorah. One perspective is that this period of time is indeed a very unique time of the year. It's called the 3 weeks. And indeed, we have 2 sources that actually say that these 3 weeks are different than other weeks. Number 1, in the Haftorah we're going to read in one of these 3 weeks, Yirmiyahu is asked by God, Ma'ata ro'eh, what do you see? And Yirmiyahu says, Makel shaked ani ro'eh, I see a branch of an almond tree. Based on this, the Yerushalmi Talmud in Maseches Taanis says that there are 21 days between the time that the city walls were breached until Tisha B'Av, when the temple was destroyed. And what is the way to remember it? Makel shaked ani ro'eh. Remember the almond branch. Just like it takes that almond branch from the time that it's planted until you see sprouting 21 days. So too, it took 21 days, 3 weeks, from the time that the city walls were breached until the temple was destroyed. That's not the only source. There's another source based on the pasuk in Eicha, Korotfea Hisigua Ben HaMetzarim. All those that were pursuing the Jewish people got it between the straits. Says the Medrash, indeed, they got us during the time between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, in which this demon Meriri rules. And indeed, the Shulchan Aruch actually paskins that during these 3 weeks, you should not go out at certain times of the day alone for a walk. Why? Mishum Shebahem Ketev Meriri Sholet. Reason number 1 for reading a certain Haftorah is because you're in a certain period of time. In other words, this period of time is called the 3 weeks. It's not only dates, it actually has a status, and therefore we read a specific Haftorah. However, there's another perspective, and that is that these 3 weeks are not going to stay there forever. God willing, they're going to turn into Yomim Tovim, so they cannot have a special status. And indeed, maybe there's a totally different reason why we read this Haftorahs, and that is because we always read Haftorahs based on Inyane Dioma, whatever we're dealing with that day. If it happens to be a day in which we're dealing with something specific, forget about statuses, forget about having a special chalot. We read a Haftorah in honor of that day. Let me give 2 examples. The Tosfot deals with the year just like ours, in which there's going to be a Shabbos between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. So how do we divide up the Haftorahs? Point of view number 1 is, so you read Dirsho Hashem Behimatzo on Shabbos Shuvah, which we usually read on fast days. Then you read Shuvah Yisrael. You read the Haftorah, what we call Shabbos Shuvah, on the Shabbos between Yom Kippur and Sukkot. Why? Because Dichtiv ba v'natati lacha yoreu malkosh v'chen Hashem atan kolo lifnei chelo demishtai b'mayim v'sheyach shapir lifnei Sukkot. In other words, because it talks about water, and we're about to go into Sukkot, in which we are indeed judged for water, therefore we read it before Sukkot. And then he brings the other point of view. which says that you read Shuva before Yom Kippur as we do, and then Sos Hasis between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, because Sos Hasis is a very happy Haftorah. We're going into the happiest holiday of Sukkot. Quite frankly, they're both basically saying the same thing, and that is, whatever you're dealing with that day, whatever's on your mind, that's the Haftorah you should read. And maybe the best expression of this is the Ramah. The Ramah comes along and says, if there's an Afruf in Shul, that obviously is not a special status for anyone in the shul. It has to do with one person. Paskins the Ramah, Nohagim la'aftir b'chatunas, sos hasis. You read the Haftorah sos hasis because it talks about a chassan and a kala. And though you usually will not do that on special Shabbases like the 4 Parshas or whatever, shar Haftorot dochin mipanea. You can take a regular Haftorah, throw it out, and read this instead. So as you can see, there's 2 perspectives on why we read these 3 Haftorahs and then 7 Haftorahs. One is, there's a special status to this time of the year. It's called a time of Ben HaMitzarim, between straits, or Makel Shaked Ani Ro'eh, like an almond tree, and therefore we have to be sensitive to it as if it's a yontiv, lahavdil, and therefore we read a special Haftorah. But there's another perspective, and that perspective is that these days are going to change into Yomim Tovim, so they can't be a special status. But rather, whatever's on your mind, that's what you read. And therefore, if what's on your mind is the upcoming Sukkot, you read a Haftorah that talks about water. Or what's on your mind is Sukkot, where it's a happy holiday, you read Sos Hasis. Quite frankly, that's why the Ramah says, if there's an Afruf in Shul and they threw candies, what's on your mind is Afruf, you read a special Haftorah. This comes to fore in a very interesting nafkamina, and that is, what happens exactly this year when Rosh Chodesh will come out on one of these Haftorahs. I would like to suggest that this is exactly why the Shulchan Aruch and the Torah codified their laws differently. The Shulchan Aruch said is, you read Gimel de Poranuta and Zayin de Nechamta. Shulchan Aruch's perspective is, there is a special status to this time of the year. After all, he paskin the Ketev Meriri thing that's based on the pasuk of Kol Rotfea Hisigua Ben HaMitzarim. And because it's a special status to this time of the year, he paskins like the first day on the Mordechai. If Rosh Chodesh Elul comes out on Shabbos, Maftirin on the Yasar, you do not change the Haftorah to the Rosh Chodesh Haftorah. But the Mordechai brings another point of view. You actually do read the special Rosh Chodesh Haftorah. Why? Because that's what's on your mind that day. It's Rosh Chodesh. You just said Hallel. And indeed, the Torah comes along and says, what did the Torah say? And I quote his words again, that we read at this time of the year, Lefi Hazman v'Lefi HaMe'orah, namely what's on your mind. There's no special status to these days, but what's on your mind. And therefore he paskins that if it happens to be a Rosh Chodesh, that's what's on your mind that day. That's what you read. And the Ramah, who said that if there's an Afruf in Shul, you change the Haftorah, he comes along and says, if Rosh Chodesh Av, like this year, will come out on Shabbos, he brings 2 deos, Maftirin Shimu, maybe you read one of the 3 Haftorahs of the Harsh Haftorahs, the Yeshomim HaShamayim Kisi Bechenikar B'makom Shein Minhag. The Ramah will always go ahead and say whatever's on your mind, that's the Haftorah you read. When there is these special Haftorahs at this time of the year, why do you read it? According to the Shulchan Aruch, it's a special status of this time of the year, the 3 weeks, and therefore, nothing changes. There could be a Rosh Chodesh, you read the 3 Harsh Haftorahs and the 7 Haftorahs of comfort. But that is not the perspective of the Torah. The Torah said, Lefi Hazman v'Lefi HaMe'orah, whatever's on your mind. There is no special status to this time of the year, because it's going to change for the better. And therefore, if a Rosh Chodesh comes out, a little change for the better, you read the Rosh Chodesh Haftorah.